Hola clase, soy profesora Sánchez y hoy vamos a hablar sobre nouns, number, and gender. So we have a lot to cover today. It's all grammar, so you really need to pay attention. There's going to be a lot of new concepts for you, some old ones, hopefully, but we are going to need you to memorize a lot of this, study it on your own, and again, practice, practice, practice. So nouns, number, and gender. First of all, what is a noun? I know you all learned this, in second grade probably, but that might be a long time ago for most of us. So what is a noun? Just a refresher. A noun is a person, place, or a thing. Technically also it could be an idea, but for purposes of this book that we're using, they refer to it as a person, place, or a thing. So in English, we have a couple nouns here on the left for, if it's a person, it could be a dentist, it could be a friend, a place could be a city or Guatemala, and a thing could be, a physical thing, a house or a hospital. En español, lo mismo, persona, dentista, amigo. Si es un lugar, ciudad, Guatemala. Y si es una cosa, casa o hospital. Those are just some examples. Now, number is also a pretty basic concept. So we have this in English as well as in Spanish, obviously. So when we talk about number, we're only talking about if the word that we're referring to is singular or plural. So here on the left, you have words that are in the singular, which means there's only one of each. So I have one banana there to help you remember. So casa, amigo, ciudad, y hospital. Now in the plural, you have multiple things: casas, amigos, ciudades, hospitales. So pretty basic stuff, but just, a refresher, you will need to know what this means in English so that you can understand the concept in Spanish. So in Spanish, how do we make a word go from singular to plural? We have a couple rules that you'll have to memorize. So first of all, if a word ends in a vowel, like in our case, casa and amigo, see how the last letter is a vowel? You will need to simply add an S to the end of the word. So casa becomes casas, amigo becomes amigos. Now, if the word ends in a consonant, like in the case of ciudad or hospital, you will need to add an ES. So we have ciudad becomes ciudades, hospital becomes hospitales. So just take a minute to think about that. Once you have that memorized, there are always some exceptions to every rule, unfortunately, and these exceptions are just something you're going to have to learn. And we have exceptions in every language, especially English, so be patient with yourself learning these rules. So first exception to that vowel versus consonant rule is cicatriz, as you can see, ends in a Z, which is technically a consonant. We still add the ES, but what we do to the Z is we have to turn it into a C. So as you can see, cicatriz, which means scar, turns into cicatrices. So not only do you add the ES because it's a consonant, but you have to change the Z to a C. Another exception to this rule, or just something you have to memorize, is in the case of words ending in ON, with the O having an accent on it, like moretón, which means bruise, you have to remove the accent when you change it into plural. So moretones, as you can see, no longer has an accent over the O. So moretón ends in a consonant, an N, so you add the ES, but you change it to moretones by removing the accent over the O. So this is how you change a word in Spanish from singular to plural. So again, in most cases, you're going to look at the last letter of each word, decide if it's a consonant or a vowel, and if it's a vowel, you add an S. If it ends in a consonant, you add an ES for the most part. And then you just have those two exceptions that we learned. So if it ends in a Z, you're going to change the Z to a C. And if you see an ON with an accent on the O, you're going to remember to remove the accent over the O when you make it plural. So let's practice. A practicar. So if you open up your books to page 9, you will see Ejercicio 1-4 in your book. So if you want to follow along there, it might be good practice for you as well. So we're going to do this together. So on the left, we have the examples from the book. Dentista. Dentista ends in a vowel. A is a vowel. So what should we do to make it plural? We add an S. Dentistas. Lápiz ends in a Z. A Z is a consonant, so we add the ES, but we have to remember that when words end in a Z, there's an exception, and the Z changes to a C. So it becomes lápices, pencils. Farmacia ends in a vowel, an A, so it becomes farmacias, the pharmacy. Hombre ends in a vowel, an E, so it becomes hombres. That means men. Mujer ends in a consonant, so we're going to add an ES to make it mujeres, women. Condón ends in that ON with the accent over the O. So if you remember, that's another strange one. You have to take the accent mark off of the O when you make it condones, which means condoms. Doctor ends in a consonant, so you would add an ES, doctores. I assume you know what that one means. Ciudad ends in a consonant, so you add the ES, ciudades, means cities. Inyección has the accent over the O, so you're going to remove the accent over the O. Remember to add an ES because N is a consonant, and it becomes inyecciones, injections. And nariz, which means nose, ends in a Z, so that's another strange one. So the Z becomes a C, as you remember, and then we have to add an ES because it's a consonant to make it narices. Okay, great. So that's just a little practice for us together as a group. Later you'll be getting lots of practice doing this on your own, but you can always come back and refer to this as a refresher if you need it. Now let's talk about gender. In Spanish, gender is género. So you might hear that term in this class, género. Gender is very important in Spanish. So in English, we actually have 3 different genders in our grammar. So in English, we have masculine, feminine, and neuter. So masculine words are things like man or boy, where everyone knows that that's a masculine word. Same with feminine, woman, girl. However, the majority of our words in English are neuter words. They do not have a gender. So table, chair, hospital, clinic, bed, desk, sickness, whatever it may be, the majority of our words are neuter. So it's not a big concept when you're learning English as a kid. However, in Spanish, this is a huge concept that a lot of people struggle with when they're learning a new language that has a lot of gender issues. It's just something that you really just have to memorize. And again, I know that I say this all the time, but practicing is really the key to getting familiar with everything. So there's going to be a lot of vocab lists where, you'll have to memorize whether or not the nouns are, or the words are masculine or feminine. So here we have some basic examples of some masculine words in Spanish. Hombre, hospital, vaso, amigo. And some feminine words. Mujer, casa, ciudad, amiga. We do have a lot of rules to memorize for this, so some guidelines for you. As most of you, I would assume, would know, for the majority of the words ending in O, you know that they will be masculine. For the majority of words that you hear ending in an A, you know they will be feminine. So everyone, hopefully taking this course, knows what an amigo is. It's a friend, right? Amigo with an O means a male friend. Amiga ending in an A will always mean a female friend. So it's just a really simple example so that when you're struggling with trying to figure out what words are masculine, what words are feminine, if you see that it ends in an O or an A, for the most part, not all the time, but for the most part, you should be safe saying that O words are masculine and A words are feminine. However, there are always some exceptions, so just keep that in mind. So here are some more examples of words ending in O or A. So on the left we have the masculino words, and that is amigo, sobrino, libro, antibiótico, trabajo, carro. Some examples of feminine words are amiga, sobrina, casa, medicina, clínica, droga. Okay, here's your first exception to that rule that you just learned. Words that are ending in MA, so you have to look out for that M, are masculine. So even though the final letter in the word is an A, if a word's ending in MA, they're going to be masculine for the most part. And you are going to see a lot of this working in healthcare because a lot of healthcare vocab is going to end in an MA. So here we have on the right a list of some examples. Diafragma, síntoma, sistema, programa, problema, emphysema. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of those are words that you might come across working in a healthcare setting. All right, idiomas, languages, are always going to be masculine. So we have español, inglés, francés, italiano, japonés. Some examples of some languages. If you please note, in English, when we are talking about other languages or even talking about English, we always capitalize the first letter in a language. In Spanish, for the most part, we do not capitalize the first letter in a language unless it's the first word of a sentence. So, for the most part, if you see español with a little e, it's not an error. It's meant to be that way. It's just a different way of doing things in Spanish. Okay, all words ending in TAD or DAD are going to be feminine. So, libertad, universidad, ciudad are three examples you have here. So again, this is just something you're going to have to memorize so that you know that these words are feminine. Another feminine rule is most words ending in CION, the accent on the O, or SION with the accent on the O, are going to be feminine. Recepción, computación, construcción, sesión. Okay, so those will be feminine. Again, unfortunately, in every language, there are going to be exceptions to every rule. But if you stick to this and you keep practicing and go back to the exceptions that we talked about, you will be fine. It's just going to be a lot of practicing and getting familiar with new vocab. In Spanish, gender really is very important to learn, and in our next lesson we will learn more about articles that go in front of the words, which will help explain gender further, but this is just an introduction to the topic of gender. So thanks so much for your time. Gracias, and I look forward to teaching you more soon.